Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Open Doors Initiative Creating Opportunities webinar. My name is Mcdonough, and it is a privilege to join you today to discuss the barriers faced by and the supports required for marginalised communities seeking employment in Ireland. This is a crucial conversation at a critical time for our economy and our society. I'll be joined shortly by Finance Minister Paschal Donohoe to speak to this unique moment that we still find ourselves in, and to also discuss some of the challenges and indeed some of the opportunities that lie beyond COVID-19. Fernando Vicario, the new CEO of Bank of America Europe and the newest member of the Club to Open Doors Initiative, will also be joining us from London. Finally, I will be joined in studio by Mcdonough, the CEO of the Open Doors Initiative. Now, just because we are virtual does not mean we are not interactive, and we would really encourage you to join in the conversation across all of our social channels, the website. You'll find us at Open Doors to Work on Twitter, and you can also contact us on LinkedIn. And I can assure you that we have a great conversation that's going to unfold over the next 45 minutes or so. But first, to give a formal welcome, let's hand over to Siobhan O'Shea, CPL Director and a board member of the Open Doors Initiative. You're very welcome this morning, Siobhan.
Thank you, Derval, and good morning and a warm welcome to all of our audience online today. We want to thank the Minister and Fernando for joining us, and you, Derval, for agreeing to MC the event and bring your wealth of experience to the discussion today. Thank you all for your time and expertise. It's only been 6 months since we last came together, albeit virtually, and so much has taken place in that time. I'd like to give you a whirlwind tour of some of the projects and programmes that we are involved in. It is so important to us that the Minister is here today, as government plays a key role in our work. Not only are they a key sponsor of the initiative, but various departments also play a role in our work and funding. We engage with them on addressing issues and removing barriers to successful training and placement programmes. One example I would like to talk about is Employers for Change. We look forward to the launch on the 11th of March of this service, and we hope you will all join us for that event. Employers for Change will be a hub pointed to employers to share information, advice and other services, to encourage them to actively seek out people with disabilities as employees. We also created a migrant hub to build a focus for all material related to migrant employment, in conjunction with other supporting partners in this area. This will align very much with what has been done with Employers for Change. We are proud also to be leading on Corda, the Allies Network. This is a campaign in conjunction with the Open Society. It brings refugee families from Syria and other places of extreme need and resettles them here in Ireland within a community of allies. Open Doors have been asked to lead on developing supportive relationships with business, sport, finance, religious and any other groups who can help support and integrate these families, including helping them find employment. We will be reaching out to you all in relation to this soon and would love your support. In terms of disadvantaged youth, we will be carrying out research into how COVID has affected their engagement and usual supports with some of our partners in this area. This will help with funding and engage them back into education and employment for their long-term benefit. So that is just some of the work that the Open Door Initiative team have been carrying out. This, alongside the great and inspiring work of the company members in these areas, is making a huge difference. I, along with the board, are really enthused by the work and the future potential. If you're not already a member, certainly please do think of connecting with us and making pathways to employment for those who most need them. Thank you, and I'm going to pass back over to Derval.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. Well, look, our first guest needs no introduction. Finance Minister since 2017, Eurogroup President since last July, Paschal Donohoe is at the epicentre of the Irish and European response to COVID-19. You're very welcome this morning, Minister. I know the numbers have improved somewhat, but in terms of those who are on government supports, but a quarter of the Irish labour force is unemployed, 400,000 jobs have been lost, and close to 1 million jobs are being supported through various government schemes. It's still such a big thing to take in, isn't it, Minister?
It sure is, and we're approaching the year anniversary here, Derval, in Ireland, as you know, of when the first signs of COVID-19 became apparent in our society. And in the last year, it has been so hard for so many. But the two optimistic notes that I would make, and I'd love to explain the case for optimism as well with you, which I think is important at the moment, is firstly, while you're correct to point out to the breadth of support that we have in place at the moment, this is still support that we are able to do, and it is support that's making such a huge difference to so many citizens at the moment and so many employers at the moment. And then secondly, if you look at where we are now, a year ago, so many of us wondered, would there be light at the end of the tunnel? Where we are now, a year later, is we are asking ourselves how long the tunnel will be. And if you and I had had this discussion 12 months ago, and I had said to you 12 months then that we would still be in lockdown in February of 2021, I think it would have been a cause of such concern and such worry to so many. But on the other hand, if I had said to you, we would now have a choice of vaccines available to us, that would have looked so optimistic to have urged on the naive. So amidst all of the challenges that we are facing, there are grounds for optimism and are reasons to remind us of the fact that we will make progress as we move through the coming weeks and months.
I was looking, Minister, this morning at IAG's results, obviously the parent company of Aer Lingus, and looking at the devastation in that sector and including other sectors. And I was just wondering for you, what is so different about this crisis, say, compared to other crises we've had before, say, the global economy after 9/11 or the financial crisis? Is it the scale and just the sudden nature of it that makes it so sort of hard to get our heads around?
Well, a few things are fundamentally different to where we were a decade ago. Firstly, this is a crisis that has its origin in biology. It doesn't have its origin in economic policy mistakes or mistakes that were made by the private sector. This is a crisis that has its origin in a disease. Secondly, is because of that, this is a genuinely global crisis. It is affecting either all parts of the world currently, or if there are parts of the world that are not currently affected by it, they have been affected by it in the last 12 months. But then thirdly, what marks this to be very different to where we were a decade ago is if the scale of the challenge is so big, the scale of the response to date, at least economically, has also been vast. Whether it be what has happened in America, what has happened in Europe, what has happened across the G7 global economies of scale, the level of economic response back to this crisis recognises its different origin and the scale of the challenge that we face.
Unfortunately, Minister, we're now seeing across the globe and across the global economy, we're seeing extreme poverty returning to some areas, which is obviously extremely concerning. But to bring up this debate back, I suppose, to the reason why we're here looking at marginalised communities, in its latest communication to the government, NPHET has identified how COVID-19, we're in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And NPHET has said that COVID-19 has magnified the inequalities faced by many of the marginalised communities that the Open Doors initiative works with. So whether it is the Roma, the traveller community, migrants, people who are really on the margins. How are we going to protect those vulnerable communities the most? Because there are many sectors of the Irish economy that are doing quite well.
Well, firstly, a big shout out and recognition to the work that Open Doors do. I'm conscious that I'm probably speaking to converted because people who are on this discussion here with us are aware of their work and are supporting it. But if any aren't, really would encourage them to do it. To answer your question, this is why we have to intensify our efforts to reach out to marginalised communities at a time of a pandemic. There are, I think, a case to make that over the last 12 months, our health efforts have been successful in reaching out to those marginalised communities, to the Roma community, to those that are homeless, to those who are particularly vulnerable, that we have worked really hard to try to shield them from the worst threats that COVID-19 could bring. But then, Derval, as we get to the point of how we rebuild our economy and how we reopen, it's just critical that efforts that we were making to build an inclusive economy are not put on the back burner as we are looking to reopen, that we don't relegate to, nice to have our efforts to build inclusive workplaces and to reach out to those who are marginalised, to bring them into work. And it's really important that we maintain focus on that when we get into rebuilding and reopening our economy.
There have been many debates, Minister, about, whether it's universal basic income. Economists all over the world are talking about how the whole economic models could be restructured. But why is an inclusive recovery so important? And what are the opportunities in this difficult moment to actually maybe reset and have a much more inclusive economy in society?
Well, first and foremost, we have a moral duty to reach out to our brothers, our sisters, our neighbours, our fellow citizens who have additional challenges in their own lives. We have a moral duty to help and reach out to them, to bring them into the fold, so to speak, of an economy and into the fold of having a job. And somebody having a job and having access to a regular job with good terms and conditions is central to how we can create inclusivity within an economy, which ultimately then is vital to democracies maintaining support for market economies. And then finally, workplaces that respect inclusivity and reflect the diversity of the society within which they are located, I believe in the long run will also be better workplaces, more productive workplaces, and happier workplaces. So there's so many different layers to the argument as to why we need to do this, beginning with morality, stretching into maintaining support for economies, then moving into the fact that it's good for those workplaces as well. So there's a really, really, really positive argument to be made there, which I think underpins the work that Open Doors do and how they engage with so many employers at the moment.
And obviously some welcome news this morning with the white papers showing the report that actually direct provision will be phased out over time and some better supports for people living there. Minister, before I go on to speak to Fernando, can I talk to you about, Siobhan spoke about the importance of having you here this morning, because essentially the work of the Open Doors initiative and trying to reach out to marginalised communities, it's a whole of government effort. It's not the job of one government department, and I know that Open Doors itself is working across a number of departments, including your own. And how important is that to have that whole of government approach to what I think nobody here will be blind to the fact that this can be quite a complicated area in terms of policies and bringing in best practice.
Yeah, we have to see this as being something that we all have a responsibility for. And if I can say, the fact that you heard Fernando here participating in this discussion, the leader of a massively important employer for Ireland and across Europe, not to obviously mention within America, is a sign of the fact that this is a process, a duty that, stretches beyond human resources in an employer, stretches beyond the Department of Health or the Minister O'Gorman's department. It is something that we all have a duty to play our role in. And whether it is the role of the Department of Finance as an employer and making sure that we're conscious of our responsibilities and we're striving to it, or whether it is my role as Minister for Finance in indicating the huge support that I have for this kind of work and how, it's so important on so many different levels to the future of our society and on our economy. One of the things we are, I think, all recognizing is that it's not responsibility of part of a leadership team. It's the responsibility of all leaders, all people who are in roles to influence companies, employers, or even our country. And that's one of the reasons why I was delighted to accept the invitation to participate in this event.
And it's interesting, Minister, because last year when Fernando Vicario was named as Bank of America's European chief, it was placed or framed very much in the context of all of these financial firms preparing for Brexit. And then, of course, Fernando, COVID came, and part of the reason why you haven't been able to relocate to Ireland just yet, to where I think we've 900 staff for Bank of America and across Europe managing assets of over 70 billion, is because of COVID. It's been quite I suppose, an interesting first couple of months for you, Fernando.
Well, thank you, Daryl, and of course, my congratulations to Open Doors, because I'm learning what Open Doors are doing, and I'm delighted that we in Bank of America can join this journey of growth, a journey of supporting broader activities in the Irish society, because this is not about Bank of America being only in Ireland because of Brexit. Bank of America has obviously a long history in Ireland, but now with the headquarter in Ireland for our European Union activities, Ireland has become a very important country for us within all of Europe. Now, COVID is preventing me to go to Ireland, but virtual conferences like this and virtual meetings can allow me to do my job. And as soon as COVID is defeated, and I'm an optimist like the minister, because we have a choice of vaccines that are certainly kicking off and kicking in, we will soon hopefully be able to meet in person on Irish soil. Now, if I may, a couple of highlights from the Bank of America side. First of all, we engage in a number of initiatives in Ireland, but clearly it's about driving the culture in a company which is hopefully representing a large group of multinational corporations with presence in Ireland that are trying to do the right thing by actually being inclusive. Allow me to use the expression which I love to use inside the bank, ruthlessly inclusive. There's no option of doing things on your own. It's when people come together to get things done faster. And given what we are experiencing around the COVID threats, what we need now is an acceleration of, if you will, the transformation in our society to help each other and be and not be at the mercy of a threat that will pass, and then we'll move on to the next chapter of hopefully prosperous economic growth. So Daryl, I'm looking forward to being in Dublin very, very soon.
And we look forward to that too, Fernando. Can I ask you, why is inclusion so important to business? Because sometimes there is a sense that diversity and inclusion can be a bit of a box-ticking exercise, but is there a real sense that your social license to trade, for want of a better phrase, is now intrinsically linked to how representative and inclusive your business is?
Well, I think we need to step back here and think about demographics. Demographics indicate that our society is very diverse. And if we are not inclusive, we are excluding part of our society. That's not an option. Here at Bank of America, we have a so-called diversity and inclusion network, where in different chapters within the network, we drive inclusion. We drive inclusion in country, in region, and globally, because we basically want to recruit very interesting talent around the world. And I keep telling my colleagues in Ireland that we are so lucky to have this pool of talent that is helping our firm to do business not just in Ireland and in Europe, but also beyond, because we serve other countries. So diversity and inclusion means for us clearly starting with each other's work. And I'll give you my example. I started to engage in our Diversity and Inclusion Council. I'm the co-chair of that council for Europe, Middle East, and Africa 11 years ago. And I started to engage because we have a subsector which is called Women's Leadership Council. And I realized that on my team, the majority of the senior positions were occupied by male colleagues. And I made my job to actually contribute by promoting and fostering the development of female senior talent. That has happened in the meantime. Bank of America's workforce, almost 200,000 people, is composed of 50% of female talent. Our board, actually, Bank of America Corporation's board, has actually 40% of female talent. And our executive management team globally has 30% of female talent. And we are working on improving these numbers further. My Irish headquartered bank that I represent on behalf of Bank of America has also a wealth of, if you will, diverse talent. And that starts with the board, with the executive management team, and then with the entire workforce that work for us across the Irish platform. So look, this is not a nice to have, as the minister said. This is something which we have to do. And what I personally contribute, I started to mentor talent many years ago. And then I realized 3 years ago that even at my level, I will benefit from reverse mentorship. So I have a number of actually young, talented colleagues in this bank that are giving me their guidance and their perspectives of how to do better things as a senior manager to drive culture within our firm.
It's really interesting, Fernando, because Bank of America has 11 different networks, and some of them we might think are now obvious: women, LGBT, but you also have an intergenerational network, a multicultural one, and one even just relating to parents and caregivers. And another one is actually just in relation to disabilities. And it is extraordinary to think that worldwide, half of the world's population are affected or touched in some way by disabilities, either that they have them or that, you know, there are people in their lives that do. So how important is it to move beyond those who are really on the margins, to engage them in the workforce, but also that big employers and big companies with a social footprint like yours really reaches out to those, because of course those people bank with you as well?
Well, the disability network that we have has had an interesting journey. Historically, it used to actually focus on the inclusion of disabled, if you will, members of the team and recruiting that talent into the bank. Unfortunately, due to COVID, mental health has gained substantial importance. And I say this because working from home is not easy for everybody. I was reminded the other day by one of my Irish colleagues, it's nice to have a home and it's nice to work from home, which means you have a job. But in the daily trenches, it looks differently. Working from home creates additional pressures. The setups at home are not always perfect. Not everybody has a big house and can just escape into a separate room and work from home. So we have encountered, I think, in society, not in Bank of America only, with a group of people that actually are not liking working from home and require support. And there you kick in with obviously important initiatives where we sometimes have a routine in place around meeting frequency, checking in with people how they are doing, distributing workflows, telling people to take some calls, not from their home, but actually walk around and get some fresh air and not roll from their bedrooms into their home office and from their home office into their bedrooms. So our mental health, if you will, initiatives are multifaceted, and at the end of the day, aim for healthier employees, healthier people, and a better way to service our clients with happy employees.
I saw the Minister furiously shaking his head in agreement. Minister, there's a big question as to whether we're working from home or living from work. But I think that just what Fernando was talking about there was the kind of reckoning potentially down the line. I know you've said there won't be a cliff edge, but really some of the big challenges as well. I suppose when we think of diversity and inclusion, we've probably perhaps overlooked to the extent to which even mental health is going to be something that we really need to look out for as we come out of this crisis.
Yeah, I was nodding my head in agreement with so many of the points that were made by Fernando, and particularly the point that he made about being more appreciative of the challenges that working from home can bring. The reality, I think, for some, if not many, is that after a year of working from home, the initial excitement around us is being replaced by some by the prospects of kind of semi-isolation, of not having the ongoing social support that the office and workplace brings. And I'm really conscious of that as a risk. And I'm particularly conscious of it if people are living in a home or an apartment in which there's a few other people living in and working in, and what that can mean for their own well-being and even mental health. So I think that is something that we need to be really conscious of. And when we get into the debate, and I believe we will, regarding how we can reopen offices safely, to recognise that there is a really important well-being dimension to that process that will, I think, matter to quite a few people who are currently working from home.
Fernando, before I bring Jan Mcdonough in, I just wanted to ask you a question, again, just to go back to that business, that sort of social licence to trade. Who do you think will drive or insist on inclusion in business models? Is it investors? Is it shareholders? Is it customers? You know, if you say people can't get away with just ticking the boxes anymore, where do you think that energy or dynamic is coming from?
So, Devil, I think there are a number of different agents of change. We can't ask our governments to look after us. Actually, companies, governments, regulators, investors, and activists, they need to come together. And I say this because there's a broader ESG agenda taking off in the world. The World Economic Forum, under its International Business Council, has launched actually a so-called Stakeholder Capitalism initiative, which brings together a number of rules to enable companies to actually comply with certain so-called ESG agendas, environmental, social, and governance. Today, it's more about the social component. And frankly, if companies behave with a good, strong ESG agenda, investors like them because they are better managed companies, they are less risky companies, they are companies which drive the right culture, and these companies, they will look after four things. Firstly, people. Secondly, the planet. Thirdly, prosperity. And lastly, which is important in business, proper governance. So look, we at Bank of America are driving hard the issue of so-called ESG compliant bonds, green bonds, social bonds, and the world of investors is desperately looking into this. And I'll give you just one number. Right now, there are assets under management of $40 trillion, which have some ESG component or criteria attached to them. We as a bank need to make sure that these, if you will, financial instruments continue to get originated so that investments get actually directed into the right places. And lastly, at Bank of America, we have committed our own balance sheet, in fact, $200 billion for so-called ESG compliant activities to support our clients to get them to the right place from an ESG perspective. So look, exciting times, an opportunity for business, and therefore an incremental opportunity for employment and inclusion. That's the game plan.
And if anything gets the attention of a board and an executive team, it's governance and compliance. I'm joined in studio now by Jan Mcdonough, and it is so exciting to actually not be working from home. I think it's the first time I've worn high heels in ages, and apologies to my hairdresser for doing it all myself. But Jan, it's tough for us. Jan, we have heard from the Minister and from Fernando just about the societal and the political and the business case for inclusion. But you're working at the coalface of this. So what makes an inclusive employer, and why does it matter?
Well, unfortunately, I've come after both of you and you've taken all the good lines. But I think it's not just an inclusive employer, it's an inclusive society. And in order to make a society inclusive and equitable, which is really important, all boats have to rise. And you can't help some people and not others. So I was given a cartoon by Des Henry and Walk, and it shows three people looking over a wall to watch a match. One person is standing, one person is on a box, and one person is on a ramp. And the idea is that they're all equitable, they can all see the match, but some of them need little supports up. And I think that's what we have to do as both employers, as employees, as a wider society, is give people who need it, put the boxes in place for them. And I think that's what Open Doors does very well. And I think it's what a lot of the companies and the supporting partners we work with also do really, really well. They put the boxes in place. And when
it's a really simple but important sort of image that you can kind of take away.
We're all at the same level.
Can I ask you about some of the the work that you're doing in-house at the minute, just to maybe, because there are some people who are joining us today who aren't members of the Open Doors Initiative, but maybe thinking, could they join? And I was just thinking, what are some of the initiatives that you're doing that shows how you're putting those boxes or those supports in place?
Okay, well, Siobhan covered off quite a few of the big pieces of work with Employers for Change, with the Migrant Hub and with Corja, which we're very excited about, because I think it gets to the heart of what our work is, which is collaborative, which is working with various groups. There's over 90 organisations working with Open Doors now. And last year, pre-COVID, with far less number, we helped over 2,300 people. And that can only grow, even despite COVID and despite all the barriers that puts in place. So we're working on various pieces that...
really important cohorts, like for kids coming out of foster care, for refugees, for people who are in direct provision, but for those who, at the best of time, it's really difficult, but now more than ever, it's really important to take whatever barriers there is for them to get them back engaged, or at least in training or in situ to hopefully what will be a recovery that they'll be able to benefit from.
Absolutely, and there has been huge disengagement, and we've seen it and other NGOs have seen it. You know, the usual supports that are in place for people, be it social work, be it youth club, be it friends, be it family, have all gone to one side, unfortunately. And that leaves people quite vulnerable and quite marginalised, even more so when it's compounded by the fact you may have differing ability, you may be from a different background entirely, a different culture. You mightn't have the community links that a lot of people would have in Ireland and the connections. So without them, what do you put in place? What helps get them to, again, that sense of being equitable with everyone? So to the points that both our speakers made earlier and to what I was saying, all boats rise, all society benefits. When we pick up people from the bottom and bring them to an equitable state, everyone benefits. And I think that's what we're really trying to get across. And what our companies and our supporting partners are trying to do is to help people all get to the same level.
We've known each other for a long time through different worlds, very different worlds previously, but you are so enthused about this. What is the best part about this job, or what is it that you're just so engaged with this work?
Definitely the connections, the people I've met. There's one woman I've met who I started mentoring, and the mentoring, to my shame, went out the window. We became really, really good friends. She's a refugee, and she has had, she's lived through extraordinary times, hardship, awful things have happened to her. She's gotten very sick, but she has taught me so much. I mean, what was meant to be me helping her has totally flipped. She's taught me resilience, bravery, kindness, and she's taught me this sense of purpose in her life. She wants to work. She wants to be part of Irish society. And she's learning Irish. She's doing all these wonderful things to totally immerse herself and integrate. And she's so excited and proud to be here. And it makes me sit back and look at what I've got and my society and my friends, my benefits, and make me realise, God, how blessed am I? How lucky am I? But most of all, to have met her. And that's what I want for everyone else. I think if you open your mind, integrate with someone else, have the cup of coffee, go to the seminar, hear the lived experience, it is of such benefit to you.
And Minister, I know Fernando already spoke about that reverse mentorship, but we know how when we bring in different cultures, any sense of diversity, things can change and it can create a big dynamic. And so much of it is about mindset. How important, Minister, is innovative thinking at a time like this? Because sadly, normally when we hit at times of crisis, it's those who are already on the margins that can be pushed to the margins further. So how important is it that we have real innovative thinking around all of this?
It's hugely important that we are innovative and that we are willing to adjust the policy and political frameworks within which we make decisions when the context completely changes. And I would make the point to you that is what has happened. If you look here within Ireland, if you look at the income supports that we put in place when the pandemic hit, there's clear evidence that the design of those income supports helped those the most who needed the help the most. And we changed our social insurance, our social welfare payments. We changed their level, we changed their eligibility all over a few days in response to the level of crisis we believed we were going to face into. And we have to, I guess, get the balance right as we move through the next phase of this challenge between being certain that we're going to get out of it, being agile about what we need to change, but also recognizing the value of what we have within our society and within our economy that is worth having, worth preserving, and will help us get through the challenge that we're in the middle of at the moment.
Fernando, I know Bank of America has a long and very distinguished history in terms of philanthropy and in diversity and inclusion initiatives, but perhaps for those who are at the start of the journey or those who are joining the webinar who are maybe going to try and get into this space, what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give to those companies or to anyone who's maybe just trying to think, I'd like to get engaged, I'd like to be involved, and I'd like to be a better employer and citizen?
Well, the first advice I'm going to give is become a member of the Open Door family. A little bit of advertising here for Open Door. But more importantly, if you think about a structured, broader diversity and inclusion agenda, there are many other initiatives happening in Ireland that include many parts of society that are today unfortunately excluded. I'll give you one practical example. In our bank in Ireland, we have a lot of software engineers. We have a lot of people that work in technology and operations. Well, they recently rendered their support to actually teach more than 65-year-old people how to use the internet. We sometimes make assumptions that people are on screen, that people have access to internet, that people know how to navigate the modern technologies. Well, this is not the case, and therefore these people may be excluded. So for a company to design a proper program about diversity and inclusion, yes, it starts with your own staff, but also it goes beyond. What will your own staff do for society? What are you going to give back? For us at Bank of America, we enjoy the massive support of the Bank of America Foundation, which also makes its contributions to a number of different entities in Ireland. And my job is actually to compete to get some more money into Ireland for a number of initiatives that we are driving. But drive your own initiatives, I would say to listeners, and then ask for the money to be put at work and engage personally, because signing a check is not good enough. What really makes a difference is if you make your workforce be part of these projects and enjoy these moments to drive better cultures. That would be my recommendation, apart from what I said at the beginning, become a member of the Open Door family.
And John, Fernando is right, because financial support is obviously critical, but I suppose what you're also engaged in is trying to change mindsets as well, because there is a bigger picture that's perhaps more intangible but hugely important. So what advice would you have for anyone who is trying to up their game or maybe just get involved, for example, as Fernando, well placed in the Open Door family?
You have to have a campaigning mindset. You have to become an ally. You have to think like an ally. You have to look at people and where they're coming from their perspectives. It has to be person-centered. So you can't put your ideas on them. You need to be led by the person and do what supports them. And you know, it's not a them and us. It's not I'm up here, they're up there. It's kind of we're all people in it together. So we need to collaborate. We need to be allies, and we need to campaign for inclusion and diversity. And I think that's what a lot of our companies are, that is their mindset, and that's how they go about doing their business. And I think that's what's so important in the broader society as well.
Finally, Minister, can I go to you just maybe picking up on the points by Jan and Fernando, but also perhaps just asking you about the moment that we were in, because despite all of the incredible optimism in terms of vaccines, therapies and trying to say it, we are still sort of in the hard yards. Social cohesion in terms of the national conversation, if you're tuning into TV or radio, it can be quite coarse, quite difficult and challenging at the moment. A lot of maybe criticism about communications, and it kind of seems that even though we're so close to the final line, that perhaps this has been more challenging. I think the communications message was much easier perhaps during that first lockdown, and I was just wondering, what do we do if it is about mindsets, about moving forward and making sure that we are all still, in many ways, still in this together?
Well, the unique challenge that is posed by dealing with a disease that is as infectious and as dangerous as COVID-19 is that in a national setting, let alone in a global setting, none of us are safe until everyone is safe. And this poses a really demanding challenge to a society and to our country, and indeed to the global community in dealing with this disease. And you make a very fair point regarding where we are with the national sentiment at the moment and how people feel. I'm struck by how many people tell me now that they find listening to the news really hard. And how they need to be aware of their own feelings about where we are at the moment and the need to protect all of that. And of course, in government, as is in the case in human life, every step forward isn't always the right step. Every step isn't always the best step. And we have to be aware of what we can learn from what has happened recently and what we've done recently. But I am going to end on an optimistic note because I'm genuinely optimistic about where we are and where we will go. Firstly, as great as the challenges are at the moment, Derval, particularly from a health point of view, our country has done a very strong job in responding back to COVID-19. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are alive today who have their health, who might not have if different things had happened in our country over the last 12 months. And secondly, we do have it within us from a resilience point of view, and then also in terms of public health infrastructure, to get to a better place in a few months' time. But of course,
are the hardest decisions ahead for you in particular yet? With recovery also comes risks, and we spoke earlier about that cliff edge, and but at the same time, there are going to be some challenges. Not all companies will be able to be saved. Not all jobs will be able to be saved. How are you kind of getting yourself ready for that, actually, the recovery, which presents its own challenges and as well as huge opportunities, and we hope it will be a very successful one?
Well, actually, whatever challenges lie ahead and however demanding the decisions will be, I don't believe they will be comparable in terms of difficulty and uncertainty to the decisions that we had to make in our country across March and April regarding how we had to respond back to the early onset of a disease, the scope and scale of which we did not fully understand. So when the history books are written and the archives are opened up in this building that I'm in, I think as difficult as the decisions yet could be that await, the decisions that I had to make for a number of weeks, nearly this time a year ago, were amongst the hardest I think I'll ever make. And whatever lies ahead, at least the boundaries of uncertainty are beginning to narrow. And yes, there are decisions that lie ahead that will affect so many. But Derval, that is the essence of politics and it's the essence of government. And all I can do, which I'm going to do, is approach them full of energy and full of the right intentions, while also being aware of the full set of risks that our country face. And we'll make the right decisions and we'll get through this. And in a few years' time or even a few months' time, we'll be able to reflect back on, things we could have done differently, but also, I believe, on decisions that we did make wisely and well.
And hopefully, Minister, the history books will record in future that perhaps we made a more inclusive economy here and across the world at the end of all of that. That is all that we have time for today, Minister. I know we have such a busy schedule, so thank you. Fernando, thank you very, very much. We're looking forward to welcoming you in Dublin. Thank you for joining the club and also for sponsoring today's event. And I just personally want to thank the great team here at Fuel HQ for facilitating this conversation so seamlessly. And Jan, thank you as well for being with us. So look, that's all we have time for today. Please do keep the conversation going, as I say, online, all across the social challenges. If you have any thoughts, ideas or questions, contact Jan and the team through the website. So that's us, that's for me for today. Stay safe, hold fast to hope, and thank you for being with us today.